missed when you didn't exist. I am Corbett, and I am 53 at last.
Woohoo! And I'm Lucy, and I am 23. We're back. Back
Yeah,
into it.
yeah. 30 years difference that we have to cover all the things you missed when you didn't exist. This time around, we're talking about a musical guy that you aren't going to know at all. From 1955 until 1982, he had a television show called The Lawrence Welk Show, and I bet you can't guess his name. It's Lawrence
So,
Welk.
okay. So you barely knew him. You were like 12 when the show was a thing.
My mother really liked watching it, and apparently
Mm,
my grandparents did too. I kind of remember them watching it from time to time. Not as much as Hee Haw. I think Hee Haw was the bigger thing, and we'll get to that show at some point as well.
okay,
But the
good.
Lawrence Welk Show, well, I guess I should probably start with Lawrence Welk. Lawrence Welk was a German American. He was born in North Dakota, but had a German accent or a European accent in some way. There's always kind of the joke. The parody of him was always, wonderful, wonderful. It's a music, champagne and music we're listening to. It's wonderful. It's not like anybody was being mean. It's just the way he spoke. But he was he was an accordionist. I don't know how he became a band leader because
Wow.
I've never heard of an accordionist being the front man, except for Weird Al. Very important.
That's true. That's true.
He always had a polka song during every show. Every show was like an hour long. He had the ballroom dancing. I think he had a radio show before it. He categorized his music as champagne music.
What does that mean?
That means calm, conservative, and safe. Because his counterfoil was Dick Clark, who we'll also have to have a show about because he
Mhm.
ran American Bandstand. American Bandstand was that loud, obnoxious rock and roll music that faded away and nobody ever talked about again.
Yes, indeed.
But Lawrence Welk had pretty people come on and dance ballroom dances and play orchestral music, and I don't know, it was good
Very
music.
demure vibes.
Actually, a funny story I did find out looking it up because I remembered Norma Zimmer, who was the Champagne Girl. She's like the Vanna White. I don't know if you know who Vanna White is.
I do. I
Oh,
do
do
know.
you? Well, there you go.
From Jeopardy.
We'll get a show about that one too. Don't worry. Anyway, so the Champagne Girl was always his secondary person. Whenever she would make an introduction, every other introduction, and he would make the main introduction for guests and celebrities that were on. But mostly he was always introducing the band's number or what they were about to do. There was originally another. Gotta look up her name.
But there was an original Champagne Girl. Norma was.
There was an original Champagne Girl, and he thought she showed too much leg
Oh,
because her skirt was always like ankle height or something,
yeah.
and so he didn't want any of that cheesecake stuff messing up his music.
What? That doesn't make any sense.
He fired her, and then all the fans wrote in because they really liked her because she
Yeah.
was good. Then he tried to hire her back. She didn't come back. It was kind of a thing, and then he had to go through this whole like every other show was a new Champagne Girl because none were good enough to be the Champagne Girl
Why were they called Champagne Girls,
because it
though?
was champagne music. His
Oh,
his
that's
music
the
was
thing.
champagne music. Champagne is fine dining. Champagne is eloquent.
Mm,
Champagne is for the wealthy
mm.
and the aloof and the austere.
Okay.
Now this is interesting though. I know he originally did it as a radio show because when he first started, another anecdote I found out about. At the beginning and end of every show, by the time I was seeing it, always had bubbles, like filling the screen. They'd fill the screen with bubbles. There was blown over the band at the time. When it first started, the first year, I think it was the first couple shows. I'm betting they demanded it be changed immediately because of the way it was. Number one, they had to make a bubble machine because there was no such thing. They had to make the bubble machine, and they did it with soap bubbles. And they blew soap bubbles onto the band for an entire hour while the show was
Oh
recording.
my gosh, that's awful.
The band would have to go through and clean the soap and scum off of themselves and I mean, they look like a mess by the end. They demanded it be changed, and they switched to a glycerin-based bubble machine, which is the way most bubble machines are now.
Hmm.
So they did invent something. That's kind of cool. But then they changed it, I think the year after that, where the only blue bubbles at the beginning and the end of the show. So it was just for this like one song instead
The
of
whole time.
an hour long of being drenched in bubbles.
Yeah, that would make sense.
But yeah, it was very tame music, I guess the best way to call it. Orchestral, polka. Whenever they did anything contemporary closer into the 60s and 70s, it was always the softer,
More
more
mellow
melodic
tunes.
pieces. Yeah. Like if it was the Beatles, it was like Yesterday
Mm,
or something like that.
yeah.
Or like Burt Bacharach, Neil Sedaka, the Everly Brothers, soft, calming, comfortable music. There was a controversy I remember seeing somewhere in there where they had a band on that was like a folkish band, and they did a song they did a song that paralleled smoking marijuana,
Okay.
and they immediately pulled that and apologized and never showed it again. I think it was one of those funny things.
Yeah.
But they were the moderate version of. I don't know if they were the moderate. They were the conservative version of everything.
Hmm.
They were calm. They were quiet. They were the adult music.
Boring adult music.
Nah, I would call it elevator music.
No one listens to elevator music willingly. They just do it to avoid the
Uh,
silence.
yeah, I suppose so. I didn't really hate or like the Lawrence Welk show. I would just say it was kind of a show that was on and we watched. But
But it was a music show, like
yeah,
MTV-ish. Like
not like MTV.
like
Like if MTV was mailed to you via the post
oh,
office.
like Hairspray.
No,
Oh,
no,
okay.
not even
Okay.
close. I'm sorry. I don't even have a it's I can only imagine that. I mean, it was out for 30 years. So it was syndicated, so I'm sure it's playing somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm sure it is because there's people who liked it. And it sounds like I don't like it, but I wouldn't actively search it out.
Hmm.
Personally, I bet it would be one of those shows that like guys who get high watch to
What?
like trip into it because it's basically this lilting music and crazy bubbles and all this other stuff happening. I feel like I would be pretty lost if I didn't know what I was watching. I would say it's the closest thing that you could get to a musical, like a 1950s musical on the television with no story.
Okay. That doesn't make any sense though.
They would always have the dance numbers. They would always have this orchestral, nice piece of music going along with everything. And Lawrence Welk would come out and introduce the next segment, or whatever it was going to be.
Hmm.
It was usually just a few basic segments. And I think he changed it up off and on. It was just pleasant melodic music that people could listen to and watch. And for the most part, there wasn't a lot of watching. Like you say, like, oh, like MTV. Like, well, at MTV, okay, like I was thinking about this the other night. Like, Aha, the band Aha,
Yes.
they had their big hit "Take on Me."
Yes.
If you watch the video, you go, oh, this is like this whole story, and it's drawn, and there's things happening, and gets me into the song, and I like the song, and I like the music and the story, and everything's going with it. In Lawrence Welk, it's pretty much just the music. Visually, you just watch the band play it most of the time.
Oh.
There's the ballroom dancing bits where they bring out people that are dancing ballroom style
Yeah.
together, and they look pretty, and they twirl and turn, and there's occasionally the duet, unique dance, or the lovers dance, or what do you want to call it.
Yeah. Oh,
That
okay.
it
So it was the way for everyday people when they were watching TV or listening to the radio. It was a way for everyday people to quote unquote get invited to like the high class society events because you'd be watching these very sophisticated like activities and listening to the, champagne music, which is what you would listen to if you got invited to a high society event, but that was your opportunity to experience high society.
That's a probably more accurate way of describing it than I was getting to. I think that's probably right.
That's cool in a way.
Well, it's a pseudo way to feel like you're getting this high-end cultural injection.
Yeah. Hmm.
There's nothing wrong with it. I didn't like I said, I didn't hate it. It wasn't my first choice in music for sure. I did like polka actually. Polka's fun and it's kind of lively.
It seems very odd for this show, but it's interesting.
Well, he was an accordionist, so
Well, I
it
know,
had to
but
be
like
polka.
no one in high society does the polka.
Well, he was from the Midwest. He was, German, Ukrainian cultural background,
Hmm.
and that whole area, polka's big. So I could see it. I could totally see it.
Well, maybe that way it would still keep the middle to low income people interested, is because you would still have polka music, which would be something to remind you of home a little bit more.
I guess my question to you, now that we're in the future,
Yes.
so is this like, by your comparison, actually, it's not a bad comparison. Would you say this is probably like keeping up with the Kardashians then? Like, oh, well, that's what they're doing, so I must want to do that.
I would say it could be. I think it's a little bit different because Keeping Up with the Kardashians is way more about the drama and not the, oh, I just bought, another Porsche today. I would say it's almost, to me, it seems like it's almost like Bridgerton if it had a plot line, because everyone is loving Bridgerton because it's like, oh, it's romanticizing high society and what it was like to live during that time period. Not that Lawrence Welk show was like far off from the current time period because it seemed pretty spot on for the most part. But that's kind of the only thing I could think to comparing it to, other than maybe following people on TikTok that are super rich and you just see these billionaire people posting stuff like, check it out. Here's the party of the day. Super fun, super exciting. But I don't think so. I think most people are trying to live more humbly and live back towards their home roots. There's actually, it's kind of funny but very dumb. There's the latest TikTok trend that's coming around, and it's this person trying to get ready for the day, and he's like, "Hey, I'm getting ready for the day. It's very mindful, very cutesy, very demure. I don't have a green cut crease when I go to work. Very mindful, very cutesy." Like he just kind of goes on this little rant and it's really funny, but demure is a thing that's been popping up and so everyone's been trying to figure out what this word means. And so I think it's an interesting way to think of how we are acting in society now because we're going back towards like clean girl makeup trends and this demure TikTok sound.
Mm.
And I think it's us as like trying to act differently than we normally do, but people are also still trying to stick to honesty because it's just so easy to get called out on your BS in the world now. And so there's not a lot like the Lawrence Welk show that exists today, which I think could be a good thing, but I also think it was probably nice because it provided a little bit of perspective and a little bit of the hope of we could live like this. Like we could have these kinds of parties and this kind of music.
Yeah, I think you nailed that on the head. I really didn't consider it because like a ballroom dress at the time
Hmm.
would have cost like about $500.
Yeah.
And that doesn't sound like much right now, but at the time in 55 when it first started,
Yeah.
a new car would have been like 2000. I had looked it up earlier. I was looking up general prices for stuff and like nothing was really hitting me until I noticed the tuition for Harvard, the
Hmm.
university,
Yeah.
was $800.
A year?
I don't know. It just said $800. I was like,
Wow.
you mean like the entrance fee to get in that day?
Oh my gosh.
But like that's The car was the only thing. Rent was an average of like $40, so that doesn't give me any perspective.
What do you mean that doesn't give you any perspective? My rent right now is like 1,300 compared to 40.
42. It could be 42. You know, that's tough living.
Spend that much on a tank of gas, man. Come
Yeah,
on.
I know, I know. It's a different time and a different world, and that
Yeah.
that would have been expensive. I mean, realistically, $500 on a dress even now would be expensive
Well, yes.
for me, but I don't wear as many dresses
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. Still a lot for a dress, but that would probably be about $2,000 for a
I can
dress.
tell you one thing though, if I spent $500 on a dress and it was drenched in soap bubbles, I would be ticked.
Yeah, but at that point, if you have the money to spend $500 on a dress, you probably have the money to go get it dry cleaned.
I guess man. But yeah, Welk apparently had a lot of run-ins with other people because he was always trying to keep everything exactly the same the way it was. And the world was changing. It just was just changing. And all of
Yeah.
his audience was kind of passing away. So I
Yeah, that's
think, and it's
true.
the same way anything is. Things are just going to change.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean the old stuff's bad. It just means it becomes something else now.
Yeah, that's true.
So we go from Lawrence Welk to TikTok and Demure for people
Demure.
who
Very
didn't
cutesy,
bother to get a
very mindful.
dictionary.
It was great. I taught it to my kids the other day and they're like, Miss, how do you already know this word? It popped up on TikTok like 3 days ago. I'm like, guys, I'm very mindful, very demure. I know these things.
You know, the English language has been around a little bit longer than last week.
Yeah, it was, yeah, but it was fun though. Got to give them that tidbit of knowledge.
Getting them into it. That's a good job for you. Having fun teaching.
Oh,
Ah,
yeah. There's nothing like Lawrence Welk show now. So sorry, people that want to get into high society, you gotta work for it.
yeah, there really isn't. There's no classy anything.
I mean, there can be. I think there's different class. Like, you can go to a rooftop bar somewhere and do that. I think it just depends.
No, no, I just mean like there's no, well, like, okay, when you go to court, you're
Yeah.
supposed to be dressed up. When you go on a flight, you're supposed to be dressed up. That was like old style standards. They
Yeah.
don't have that anymore. It's just a thing where people just don't do fancy stuff like they used to. And maybe it's because it's so annoying and so much extra work, but just the same.
Well, we don't have as much time to go do those things because people would go get dressed up and go watch boats leave and come back. Who does that anymore?
Eh,
Why would you go watch a boat come back when you can just wait? Like they had nothing else to do, so they would go kill
well,
time and wander
there was a
around the
time of
square.
there was a time of spectacles and wonders. I guess we're passing past that time, and spectacles and wonders are now people putting on eyeliner on TikTok.
Yeah. Hey, learning new tips and tricks helps so much. It's learning about being casual, but also not looking so casual that you look trashy.
Oh boy.
Welcome to the modern day.
The cool hair that looks like you slept in it.
Yes, that one. But you actually spent 2 hours on it and not you just rolled out of bed.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Anyway, so the Lawrence Welk show, you missed it. I don't know if you feel left out. I'm sure you could probably still see it on YouTube if you really wanted to. Who knows? Maybe even on TikTok for goodness sake, it might be there.
You're pushing your luck with that, but maybe.
Wonderful, wonderful. But for what you missed when you didn't exist, this has been the show.
See ya. Go be fancy. Be demure.